Long Island News Radio, and we're talking today with Scott Lewis. And Scott is, he's a rabble-rouser, he's a troublesome lad, But tell me about yourself, Scott. What you wrote recently was about the judicial system on trial. What was that article all about? And, try to put it in a synopsis form for me.
All right. I'm not a rebel-rouser. I'm a truth-teller.
I'm kidding.
That's and actually, Elena Satsauer, a brilliant woman friend of mine, did an incredible thing on just a week and a half ago in Manhattan. And what she did was she took an action by the legislature and represented the people with regards to the Moreland Commission, also known as the...
well, we know it. We know what the Moreland Commission is.
It was the Commission to Investigate Public Corruption.
Okay.
So essentially what she did is represent the people in the action and brought forth evidence to the fact that the Moreland Commission was a complete fraud. And essentially that's what... And she essentially said, why did the taxpayers have to pay for that? And I was present in the courtroom, and I picked up on a really key point that she made, was that as soon as they disbanded the Moreland Commission, all the judges in the state of New York got a $40,000 pay raise. So that was, to me, was a little disturbing. So I wanted to make sure we documented it and kept the momentum that Elena had going. And the reason is because I help people save on energy and invest the difference.
What about this $40,000 raise? Let's explore that a little further. Hadn't they not had a raise in many years?
True. And that's a standard mode of operation of politicians. When you have career politicians like the ones we have, they know not to spend a penny until it's time for the election. So that's exactly what they did. They held back on giving unions, and I mentioned my friend George Bloom earlier with the Communication Workers of America, and other factions. They held back on spending any money until the election year occurred. So again, the point that Elena made and proved, or actually is in the process of proving, because the decision hasn't been rendered by our judicial system, essentially that our monetary system, has essentially influenced our judicial system to the point where it's dysfunctional. So I saw this as a pivotal point in history.
What do you think the reason for that that our judicial system is corrupted? What's the cause? In other words, how is the setup itself part of the problem?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because I'm writing a book called Reincarnated. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Every day I'm reincarnated.
There you go.
I go to sleep, I die, I come back.
Well, just coincidentally, I became a believer in reincarnation because of what had transpired. The reason I went into Manhattan to meet with Elena and company is because I brought a case forward to essentially become a trustee of the Long Island Lighting Company. Now, why did I do that? Because they weren't paying their rebates and they weren't paying the contractors. So I have a brilliant friend by the name of Greg Fisher. Greg said, well, if you can't beat him, join him. I found a statute on the books. Go for it.
We're a show that takes on all kinds of issues, and we interview all kinds of people, from musicians to politicians to scientists, and people who have something to offer in the area of, day-to-day people politics. And I think that's what we have today in the person of Scott Lewis. One of the things that he's trying to do is to get on the board of LIPA, because the statute, as it was written, allowed for people to get on it without being appointed by the power brokers who would like to control everything. Now, how you doing?
Terrific.
Yeah? What how many people bought your argument?
Oh, unions, all my customers, including Bart and Anthony from Windows on the Lake.
Yeah.
They're.
Do you have you did work for them?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a energy analysis, and we had them enrolled in the National Grid rebate program for the analysis.
This is Windows on the Lake.
Correct.
Yeah, and probably the other restaurant as well, the Beach Club, right?
Yeah. So they, and well, here's the controversy. Right here, you brought up a good controversy because they were supposed to get each of those facilities a rebate, and they only received checks for one of the two facilities. So there you have it.
Yeah.
And then, so what I did was I looked back into history, and I found that the Rockefellers used the same procedure 100 years ago when they formed the public to essentially stop their competitors from with their monopoly. And what they did was gave rebates with the oil monopoly, right? So they would give rebates to their distributors. And that same strategy is being used today by National Grid, which is a UK-based company. And
when you say rebates to their customers?
Yes, whether it's rebates for energy efficiency programs where we actually do the blueprint for the energy reduction.
But you're selling that as a good idea.
Oh, it's absolutely. It's a good idea to protect their monopoly, but it's a bad idea when it comes to the customers because.
You know, years ago I worked for AT&T, specifically New York Telephone Company.
Okay.
And we had 400 telephone companies in the state of New York back in those days. That sounds ridiculous, but we did. Some of these telephone companies were 2 blocks long. They had maybe 20 subscribers on them. Mm-hmm. And they were up in these rural areas. And it was 400 of them. Some of them were much bigger. You had some with had 1,000 customers, some had 20. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened back then when I was in the company, they sent us up there during a nice storm to fix all of the lines of these little tiny companies that didn't have the resources to rebuild. And I said, why do we do that? And the answer was simple. Because we're a monopoly. But as long as we have those 400 meaningless little companies out there, we're going to get away with it.
And then until the divestiture, until people woke up.
The telephone company changed, dramatically, and all of those guys were out of business anyway, because you can't run a modern telephone company like that. But because there were so many different big competitors, so-called big competitors, that the little guys were just thrown under the bus.
I can share with you a really incredible piece that's applicable to what we're talking about here. I mentioned that the telephone company got sold to the UK. Well, Verizon Wireless in 1999 was sold to the UK. So our friend Snowden actually turns out to be a hero because they were using Verizon Wireless to peep in on all of our conversations here.
Speaking, and we're on Long Island News Radio 103.9 FM. We're talking today with Scott Lewis. Scott Lewis has been doing things in the political realm and bringing suit on things that he feels that are not quite proper. And we talked about that already. But he also does a practical thing in terms of energy use and measurement. And I see a quote in front of me here on a piece of paper. It says, "You can't manage it if you don't measure it." And that was Dr. Deming. Dr. Deming is a man who has developed manufacturing and efficiencies in business that he presented to the Japanese after he was rejected by the American automobile manufacturers. And he's a hero in Japan. But the reason why he's a hero is because when he showed them how to measure things and how to conduct business, they did better. And the tin can cars that they were making turned out to be the luxury cars that we pay a lot of money for today. So that's just a little wrap-up of the beginning of where we're going. So, Scott, what are some of the things you've been doing in the benefits of analyzing energy?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. for example, we were talking about windows on the lake.
Yeah.
So I'll just run through a quick scenario as to what went on there. We met with Bart and Anthony, and the owners of Windows on the Lake, and they were amenable to getting their electric bills lowered, so I gathered their electric bills, 12 months worth of electric bills, and consequently come up with an average, and then propose to them that we can reduce it by a certain percentage, 9, 10, 20, up to 20%, as far as energy efficiency technologies. And we put it in writing, and it's guaranteed. Mike, the quotes that we give you are guaranteed by Lloyd's of London because it's physics. It works. But if you're so inclined and you want to buy the insurance to cover the project, and if you don't get the savings that we promise, then you would get paid by Lloyd's of London. I mean, that's how good a service we provide. Now, after they agree to go forward with the project and seeing, what we do is we inventory everything down to the coffee pot. And why do we do that? Because we determine the actual load and we model their load. And what you have in front of you there is a pie chart showing an example of a hospital's load. And essentially what I mean by load is like their air conditioning, lighting.
You have it in terms of horsepower rather than megawatts and things like that.
Oh, I'm glad you picked up on that because that's a unique feature that we use to essentially arrive at exactly how the load, that's the common thread, and we use that to arrive at what is really causing you to have a high electric bill. So essentially, by analyzing the horsepower, we can come up with how to treat each of the things, whether it's the lighting, refrigeration, air conditioning, resistive load.
What's a resistive load? Because, the resistive loads that I knew when I was building was, the resistive electric heat.
Oh, bingo! That's it. It's baseboard electric. It was
a loser.
Most of the houses on Long Island have it too, or at least out east, I should say, because of the fact that it was very inexpensive to put in.
It was cheap to put in, and was $3, 3.5 cents per electric when they were promoting that.
Yeah,
3.5%. The 3.5 cents a kilowatt is. You could, do a big house. And the show is Earnestly Speaking, and we have an eclectic array of things that we talk about. And today we're talking about a lot of things. Actually, we're talking to Scott Lewis, and we're talking about the flawed process of the way we deliver energy and the possibilities and the actual corruption that has happened in our time. Starting with the nuclear power plant that we bought, we bought all the debt and gave away all the assets to another company and screwed the people. But that's what happens all the time. This is the way it works. There are very influential people that don't take a bath. The only people who take a bath is people who are down here at the lower Olympus. And that's us. And so anyway, we're going to be talking about something else here. We're going to talk about what happened many, many years ago, 400 years ago, and how people might look at us in the future 400 years from now. And you seem to have an idea that it's going to be more of the same?
Well, more of the same. Perhaps, with the way you had opened earlier, is if people don't get involved and keep a tab on the process. And the point of Elena's efforts, right, and this is back to the...
Elena, say who Elena is again.
Okay, Elena Satzauer is the director at the Center for Judicial Accountability. And what she's an extremely brave lady, has been tracking the efforts of judges and decisions, and she essentially was the one that represented the people, not our legislatures, in this action to expose the wrongdoings. Now, I don't. What I like to. I don't like to blame people. I like to blame process. Okay, and we have. And I'll just read from the letter here. You know, in our monetary system, people are unequal. The differences between social classes can be huge. Consequently, a justice system would not be useful in a monetary system. It is just an accepted idea, nothing more. And that's what it's become, because essentially, if the governor is able to pay off the judicial and pay off the legislature with impunity, then obviously neither of those branches of government are no longer functional. And that's a problem we have with our monetary system. And I've just recently received my securities license, and so now I can talk professionally about investing. I got my Series 6 and 63. People ask me, where did you go, Scott? I was like studying for 2 years. And the way I see it is that
Are you going to sell securities?
you can save on energy and then invest the difference. We'll help you with that effort.
You know, when you have a securities license, you bind yourself to a set of rules that a guy who's not licensed doesn't have to pay attention to. And
Precisely.
And it's stupid, because you're supposed to be the pro, and yet you can't do a lot of the things you think you should do and say the things you should say. I had a license. I threw it out the window after making a living selling that stuff for years and years. And I said, you know what? I don't want the confinement of it. I don't want to be liable for what I say. And I don't want to be liable for what I do. If you go into a business and you want stockholders, I can't do it. I have to go through a whole rigmarole, get a permission from some fool who doesn't know a goddamn thing about what I'm talking about.